Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This week, we're going deep on a whole bunch of stuff for you. Financial risk, happiness, the future of food and healthcare, all that good stuff. And get this, just by tuning in to us, instead of reading all those long articles and notes yourself, you've already saved like over 10 hours. That's pretty amazing, right?
Absolutely. It's a lot to cover, but I'm really excited to see how some of these themes connect. Like, did you ever think that understanding risk could actually lead to more happiness? Or how about this investing in your health today? It's kind of like building a cathedral for your future self.
I love that analogy. Okay, so where do you want to start with this mountain of info?
Well, let's kick things off with risk, shall we? We've got Howard Marks's notes on how to think about risk. He's the guy from Oak Tree Capital, and he's got this really interesting perspective. He doesn't think volatility equals risk, which is what most people think, right?
Right.
Instead, he sees volatility as more of a symptom, like a signpost pointing to where the real risk might be hiding.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So, if volatility isn't the risk itself, how does Marx define it? And how can understanding this, help our listeners make better decisions, not just with their investments, but just in life?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? Well, for Marx, risk is all about the potential for losing capital, permanently. And he's really clear that, yeah, volatility can create opportunities to buy low and sell high and all that, but it can also lead to some serious losses if you're not careful.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a double-edged sword, really.
Totally. And Marx also talks about different types of investors. Most people are either chasing returns when times are good or playing defense when things go south.
So they're basically reacting to the market instead of having, a solid game plan.
Exactly. It's all reaction, no proaction. But Marx, he suggests a different approach. He says that Oak Tree Capital, his firm, they try to perform well in both good times and bad times.
How do they do that?
Well, they focus on protecting their downside, avoiding those big risks, even when it seems like everyone else is making a killing.
So it's more of a disciplined approach, like slow and steady wins the race.
Exactly. Think tortoise, not hare. But there's this other concept Marx talks about that I found really fascinating. Perverse risk. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, it caught my eye too. What's that all about?
Well, this is where it gets kind of mind-bendy. Marx says that things that look super safe, those assets that everyone thinks are rock solid, they can actually become riskier as their price goes up.
Really? So the more popular an investment gets, the more vulnerable it becomes.
It's counterintuitive, right? Think about the housing bubble back in 2008. Everyone was convinced real estate was a guaranteed win. Prices just kept going up, and then boom, everything crashed.
Ouch. Yeah, I remember that. So how can our listeners use this idea of perverse risk when they're making investment decisions?
It's all about awareness. Don't just follow the crowd blindly. When something gets super popular and everyone's talking about it, that's usually when the risk is actually going up.
So it's about being skeptical, doing your own research, and not getting swept up in the hype.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to another interesting connection, the relationship between risk and happiness. We have Dr. Daniel Crosby's talk, Money Can Buy Happiness.
I mean, we all know money can't buy happiness, but it can definitely make things easier, right?
Right. And that's kind of Crosby's point. He says that feeling financially secure can make you happier because it gives you more time, allows you to have more experiences, and basically just improves your overall well-being. He calls it buying freedom.
Freedom from financial stress so you can pursue what really matters to you.
Precisely. But here's the catch. Crosby also says that one of the biggest roadblocks to happiness is, you guessed it, materialism.
That makes sense. Always wanting more, never being satisfied. It's like a hamster wheel.
Exactly. Crosby describes the classic materialistic person as possessive, ungenerous, and, kind of envious. They're always comparing themselves to others and never really feeling content.
Yeah, we all know those people. So what's the antidote to this materialism trap?
Well, Crosby's all about investing in experiences, relationships, and personal growth. He also talks about gratitude, being present, and focusing on what truly matters.
Sounds like solid advice. So financial security can give us the freedom to pursue happiness. What other ingredients are needed for a life well lived?
Well, on top of financial security, there's physical well-being, and that's where Dr. Mark Hyman comes in. We've got his notes on the doctor appointments and lab tests that could save your life.
Right.
He's all about preventative care.
It's like taking your car in for regular tune-ups instead of waiting for it to break down.
Exactly. Hyman's a big believer in getting a comprehensive picture of your health, not just addressing symptoms when they pop up. He recommends specific lab tests like lipoprotein fractionation, which gives you a much more detailed look at your cholesterol levels than a standard test.
Interesting. And what about fasting insulin?
He's a big advocate for that, too. It can show you early signs of insulin resistance, which is a precursor to type 2 diabetes.
So it's all about getting ahead of potential problems before they become big issues.
Right. And while Hyman acknowledges that conventional medicine has its place, he really emphasizes the importance of understanding the root causes of disease.
So not just treating the symptoms, but going deeper to address the underlying imbalances.
Exactly. It's a more holistic approach.
Yeah.
It's about shifting from, like, reacting to problems to preventing them in the first place. Instead of waiting for things to go wrong, we should be actively investing in our health, optimizing our well-being.
That reminds me of something we talked about earlier, Ari Wallach's concept of cathedral thinking. Remember from those Huberman Lab podcast notes. It's that idea of doing things that might not benefit you right now, but will have a positive impact down the line, like for future generations.
Oh, that's a great connection. Investing in your health today really is like building a cathedral for your future self. You might not see all the benefits immediately, but you're setting yourself up for a healthier, more vibrant future. And speaking of the future, let's talk about something that directly impacts our well-being: food.
Oh, yeah. This is where things get a little scary. Courtney Swan's interview on glyphosate and corruption in American Food 101 was a real eye-opener. It seems like the way the food industry is structured now, it prioritizes profit over health, which could have some serious long-term consequences. Not just for us, but for the planet, too.
It's definitely a cause for concern. Swan really digs into the whole glyphosate issue, that herbicide that's been linked to cancer. She's basically saying it's everywhere in our food supply.
It's like we're playing Russian roulette with our health, and the odds aren't exactly in our favor.
Yeah, it's a scary thought. And what's even worse is that Swan also talks about soil degradation. Like, we're losing topsoil at an alarming rate. She's warning that we might only have a few decades of harvests left if we keep going the way we are.
That's a sobering thought. So what's the alternative?
Well, Swan's a big advocate for organic and local food. Food that's produced without all those harmful chemicals and supports a more localized and resilient food system.
And this is where I see a link back to Dr. Crosby's idea of buying freedom. Choosing healthier, more sustainable food options is kind of like taking back control of our health, wouldn't you say? It's supporting a food system that aligns with our values.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have a choice and that our choices matter, not just for our own health, but for the health of the planet and, for future generations.
It's a ripple effect. And speaking of choices, this theme seems to pop up in all of these sources. Making conscious choices. It's like the common thread connecting financial well-being, personal happiness, and even the health of the planet.
Totally agree. And this idea of conscious choice, thinking critically, and acting in alignment with our values, it kind of brings us to our final set of sources. We've got Jordan Peterson's hero's journey concept from that Lex Fridman podcast interview, Sam Zell's business principle of going where it's less crowded, and Bruno Leoni's idea of universality from the Econ Talk podcast.
Oh, okay. So a pretty diverse mix there. But they all seem to emphasize independent thinking, ethical behavior, and a long-term perspective.
Right. Absolutely. Jordan Peterson's hero's journey, it's all about facing challenges head-on, overcoming adversity to grow as a person, stepping outside your comfort zone, confronting your fears, and becoming the best version of yourself.
So it's not about the destination, but the journey itself.
Exactly. And this ties in nicely with Sam Zell's principle of going where it's less crowded. Zell, the successful businessman, he believes that real success often comes from spotting those overlooked opportunities, having the guts to pursue them, even when everyone else is doing something different.
It's about having the vision to see what others miss and the courage to go your own way, even when it's the road less traveled.
Exactly. And that leads us to Bruno Leoni's concept of universality. He argues that ethical principles, they should apply to everyone, regardless of their culture or their personal interests. He relates this to the golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated.
A classic principle. It reminds us that we're all connected, and our actions have an impact on those around us.
Right. And that brings us to Ari Wallach and his ideas about transgenerational empathy and long path thinking.
Okay, so what are those all about?
Well, Wallach is challenging us to think bigger, to expand our circle of concern beyond ourselves and our immediate present. He wants us to consider the impact of our actions on future generations. Recognize that we're all part of this web of life that extends far beyond our own lifespans.
So shifting from a me focus to a we focus.
Exactly. And that's where long path thinking comes in. Wallach believes we need to adopt a mindset that prioritizes long-term goals and values over short-term gains.
It's about thinking beyond the next quarter, the next election cycle, even the next decade. Thinking about the legacy we leave behind.
Right. And that legacy doesn't have to be something huge, world-changing. It can be as simple as improving the lives of the people around you, contributing to your community, or just leaving the world a little better than you found it.
Making a difference, big or small.
Exactly. And this brings us back to where we started. Risk. In a world that's, constantly changing and more interconnected than ever, the biggest risk is actually inaction. Not taking responsibility for our choices. Not questioning things. Not trying to make a positive impact.
So we've gone from talking about financial risk to the risk of not living a life that's, meaningful. A life that actually makes a difference.
Full circle, right. It all comes back to that. And what we've learned from these sources is that real wealth, it's not just about money. It's about feeling fulfilled, having strong relationships, and, having a sense of purpose.
That sense of purpose, it can come from being part of something bigger than ourselves.
Right.
Whether it's our family or our community, or even thinking about future generations. It's about understanding that we're all connected and that our choices, they really do matter.
It's about thinking long term. Looking beyond what we want right now and thinking about the impact we want to have on the world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive. What are some key takeaways for our listeners? Stuff they can actually use in their own lives.
I think the biggest takeaway is that we have more power than we think. We can choose to invest in our health, both physically and mentally. We can choose to build meaningful relationships and, be part of our communities. And we can definitely choose to support a better food system, make choices that align with our values.
It's about taking control, being active participants in our own lives, and in shaping a better future. We're not just along for the ride. We're the crew.
We've got our hands on the wheel, and that's a powerful message to remember.
It really is. So listeners, I hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought, and hopefully it's inspired you to take action. Because all this knowledge is useless if we don't actually do something with it.
Couldn't agree more. It's not about just listening. It's about doing, making those positive changes.
So here's one last thing to think about. If you could design your ideal future, the one where you're happy, financially secure, and making a positive impact, what would that look like? And what's one small step you can take today to start building that future? Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.